Fab.
Hi Sheena,
Hi, Cleo.
how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. Lovely to see you again.
And you? How's your February going so far?
Yeah, it's going well. Pretty busy. Flying by as it does, which is nice because we're coming towards spring. So
So,
that's lovely.
yeah, everybody's looking forward to those. Well, the mornings have already started getting brighter and the evenings are a bit lighter, so just need a bit of heat.
That's it. That's exactly what we need now, isn't it?
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, the topics that we've got on the table today, and I always feel like when we have a conversation, there's something that happens just before, and I think, oh, I'm glad we're gonna have this talk of Sheena because this is so. I've been going through this, so
Yeah.
the negative self-talk, which
Mm,
I think you were saying a couple of episodes before
mm.
that it's a natural reaction, a human. It's something about us. So it's not like we can get rid of it, but it is
Absolutely.
totally a natural experience then, thing that we do.
Yeah, completely. I think it's understandable, isn't it, that as human beings, we all have a self-critic, don't we? That self-critic um is there in all of us.
Mm. Interesting, because we don't have, or I don't know, I'll ask you, so we have a self critic, do we have a self booster, like a self cheerleader? Do we have that?
Completely, yeah. And I think we
Oh, okay.
absolutely, yeah, we can build on that as well, can't we?
Mm,
I guess it's kind of like if we think about like the self-critic's picking up on our weaknesses, isn't it? Telling us that you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And I guess sometimes we maybe listen to it too much without even realizing. And I think, like you said, that self booster is
yeah,
almost like sometimes maybe sitting on the other shoulder, but it's not as loud as we would like it to be.
it's a bit shy.
Yeah, it certainly can be shy, can't it? Um, for maybe all sorts of reasons, um, that it's not that loud and the self-critic is louder.
Because I always find that so interesting. I suppose awareness is half the battle, being aware
Yeah.
what you're thinking and noticing,
Mm,
you know, that you can turn those thoughts around. Um, but I always do notice, and it's that thing of, why am I
mm,
beating myself up? Why am I really going to town? Like, oh gosh, why have you forgotten to do this? And oh, you're so silly, and you wrote it down, and you lost the paper. And I really can go quite deep with those thoughts.
mm,
And I
mm.
think a lot of people do because then we become a bit more, we lose a bit of confidence. Uh,
Certainly.
yeah, and I suppose it's the trying to balance the two. Would you say, like trying to balance?
Yeah,
Yeah,
completely. I think what you say there about awareness and noticing, I think they're two really, really key elements
mhm,
with anything, aren't they? If we
yeah,
can become more aware that we're doing something or we're hearing this negative voice, this critical voice, and noticing the impact that that's also having on
mm,
us, that's half the battle because then we can catch ourselves when we do notice it and think, you know, is this helpful? Is it necessary? Do I need to listen to it? And I guess that's the nature of negative self-talk and the self-critic is what
mm,
they do is they undermine any sort of balanced sense of self or positive or helpful view that we might have about ourselves. And that then impacts on how we feel as well,
yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the emotions that are kind of attached with the self-critic might be, a sense of sadness or inadequacy, even a sense of frustration, because it's like, here we go
Mm,
again, with that voice that's there. Um, and then I guess perhaps like we were talking about beliefs as well, weren't we? In I think the last episode or the episode before.
mm,
kind of when we have this critical voice as well, it exacerbates any beliefs that we might have about ourselves.
Yeah.
Agree?
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. 'Cause it's almost like, and I think a lot of people do have that, I think, because I see a lot of those little, TikTok videos, like people trying to
Mm.
encourage confidence and,
Yeah.
things that we can do, like how to battle that. So it must be something that's everywhere, unless it's just me and the algorithm now is just playing with that stuff. But um, there's always this thing about, for instance, if somebody, I don't know, is going to do a talk, or
Mm.
they have to be on a stage in front of whether it's a little group of five up to a few hundred,
Mm.
similar thing that people imagine, that they have to kind of crush or defeat. It's the idea that when you stand up and you're walking along, you know
Mm.
that everybody's focused on you.
Mm.
You might trip up or fall. And a lot of people say that as soon as you start to have those thoughts, you're
Mm.
more likely to trip up and fall, or
Mm.
feel embarrassed because, I don't know, yeah, you tripped, you dropped something,
Yeah.
because it's playing over and over in your mind. Whereas if you're going up with the thoughts like, "I'm gonna be amazing, I'm gonna be so great, I'm confident,"
Mm.
if those thoughts were running through, I
Mm.
think that in itself gives you a bit of a boost, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah, very much so. Because I guess it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree, isn't it? Is what you kind of share in there is if we, like you said, if you're going to go up on stage and you're going to give this presentation or you're going to do a performance or something, your self-critic saying to you, you can't do this, if we're listening to that, of
yeah,
course, that's going to be very much there, isn't it? And if we're able to think, yeah, okay, there might be 100 people there in the audience, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to do my best. And that's what I'm going to do. You're going to be more fueled, aren't you, to kind of,
yeah,
"Right, let me just go and do this. Let me just see what happens." Um, and I guess the other thing about what you were saying there is the focus of attention in, say, a scenario like that is on the self of, like, say somebody's going to give this presentation and they're feeling like they're like blushing, for example, and they might say, "Oh, I'm like really, really red. I'm, you know, red as a tomato. I'm blushing like this." Actually, the view that they have of themselves is probably entirely different to what other people might have. So, like sometimes we do these podcasts and I think a little bit before, gosh, a little bit nervous, what
yeah.
but then I'm like, well, let's just see what happens and just go with it.
And what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah,
That's the thing. What's the worst that can happen?
yeah.
Yeah, me too. I do. I get really conscious. Oh, look
Mm.
at my hair, look at my eyebrows, and then there's a point where I just say, you know what, tough. I'm just gonna. This is it. This is me. I'm going for it. And
Yeah, isn't it? Completely. That's kind of like that, right? I'm just gonna, because there's something about accepting or working towards accepting perhaps part of ourselves that we may not always like
yeah,
or struggle to accept. Um, can I share an example with you of how I kind of often, when I'm talking about the self-critic with clients, how I kind of think about it?
yeah. Please do.
Okay, so imagine you've got a child, right? So this child has got two teachers. The first teacher is very critical, um, and the second teacher's compassionate. Um, so the child does this drawing and takes a drawing to the critical teacher, and the critical teacher says, "Oh, that's really bad. We've covered this before. How come we haven't done it properly? Go away, go and do it again." Okay.
Mm.
How's that child going to feel?
I know. Um, you feel a bit crestfallen, and then you start to beat yourself up. Like, oh, and then
Yeah,
you're embarrassed,
yeah,
and then you might be more nervous
yeah.
to bring that back to them. because you feel like that's going to be a repeat. Yeah.
Definitely, so he's kind of like deflated, lack of, not motivated. I don't want to give it another go.
Mm,
That child does that, takes that drawing to the compassionate teacher, and the compassionate teacher says, "You've done really well there. You've given it a really good go. That's great. I can see you might have struggled with that bit, but we can work on that. That's okay. We all struggle with things sometimes." How might a child feel then?
boosted, on top of the world, encouraged, more confident, might even, if that was a set task,
Mm,
it might be something that they just feel like they want to do in their spare time as well, like not under those, this is your homework type of thing. But because they feel like they're now quite good at
mm,
something and it can be
mm,
improved, more
mm.
chance they're going to enjoy the next stage.
Yeah, completely. It's not kind of blocked learning. It's not been unkind. It's perhaps picked up on something that they could have done a bit better with, but that's okay because they'll get the support with it.
Mm,
And it, I guess that example illustrates how we talk to people is so powerful,
mm,
isn't it? And then you think about how we talk to ourselves is powerful as well because
yeah.
we often won't show that sense of compassion. It's easier for us to be critical as opposed to compassionate
Mm,
generally.
it really is. Yeah. Yeah, because like you say, you're more likely to find fault with yourself than you are to boost and encourage yourself.
Mm,
Mm,
absolutely. And it's almost like that block of learning that occurs as well, because if we think about the self critic, often the self critic shuts us down, doesn't it?
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Like you made a mistake there. Don't bother doing it again. You failed at that. You're a failure.
Yeah,
It's blocked
yeah,
the learning completely. Where do you go with that?
mhm. No, true, that's so true. Just that little bit of, because even the way you, describe that, like, we can work on that, that's something we can move forwards with, but always
Mm,
pointing out or finding the positive.
mm,
I think that makes it it's a whole feels like a whole different conversation, you
mm,
know, compared to, especially if it's something you're saying to yourself,
mm.
like, not even the thing of even never mind can sound like, "Oh, you failed," but if you're just saying,
Yeah,
"Wow, you did a great job. You stepped up, you took action, you did something, and now we can work on that," rather than not even acknowledging the effort
yeah,
and time that somebody's taken or
yeah.
in ourselves. Yeah, I like that. I'll remember that. That will kind of stick with me. Um, yeah.
And it's kind of like that tone of voice as well. In fact, I mean, I run a group and I run it's a compassion focused therapy group, and what we're always kind of picking up on that, like listen to the way we talk to ourselves because with the tone of voice that we have when we talk to ourselves is so important as well. If we think about the self critic, it's a harsh tone, isn't it? It's a very unkind, demeaning kind of tone, which perhaps brings with it sometimes feelings of shame as well,
Yeah.
um, of when a mistake's been made or something's been, done wrong. And kind of like hindsight's also a wonderful thing in the sense that as human beings, we can ruminate on things
Mm,
way. So we can think about something that we did and perhaps look at it in a sense of why did I do that? Um,
mm,
which again is blocking that learning, and therefore s- we will then struggle to build that confidence because it's kind of like we can't do anything about that, but we can look at, yeah, I may have struggled there. How could I do something different the next time?
yeah, something better. And
Yeah.
and sometimes I think, or I've had the experience where, um, just using yoga as a example. So,
Okay.
teaching a class, and I would always say at the end,
Mm.
well, I never really say how was that, but I would self-critique. It's like I'm critiquing myself,
Yeah.
all the people who've come to the class and saying, "Oh, I forgot to do that," but da, 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 da. And after
Mhm.
the class, I'd always kind of reflect and think about, and I was recording
Mm.
some of the classes as well. And I thought, why do
Yeah.
I always do that? Because people's reactions would be, "Oh, I didn't notice. Oh, well, that's all right." Because
Yeah.
they're so unaware.
Yeah.
It, all this conversation, it's almost like you think that
Yeah.
everybody can hear it or everybody's saying
Mm.
the same thing.
Mm.
Actually, if you just don't say anything,
Mm.
keep that in mind for yourself.
Yes.
Nobody is aware, nobody's picking out those faults. You're doing that to yourself.
Definitely. That's a
Yeah,
valid point, isn't it? Like you might notice these things, but in that room full of the people that are there doing the yoga, they probably haven't even
notice that.
noticed that or realized it. And I guess like perhaps there's a difference between self-criticism and self-reflection to a
Mhm.
degree, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
Because often in work with self-esteem, and I really enjoy working with self-esteem and confidence in my work. I think it's one of my areas that I really, really love, because it's so lovely to kind of see people building up their confidence and their belief in themselves. And I might ask clients, like, when you kind of notice that self-critical voice, does it remind you of anybody?
Mm,
Is there a voice there? And they might say, yeah, I was bullied at school. It's a bully at school, or it's a family member or a caregiver. And often there is a voice there. And again, this is not about blame, or it's about becoming more aware of where that voice might come from. Um, and sometimes there's something there that's happened, or influence to kind of the development of that self-critic. Because if we kind of think about, like, say, early life experiences again, and also later life experiences, if someone's been told they're not good enough or that they need to do better,
mhm,
that they don't get anything right, or if there's been absence of praise, that's what they're going to take on,
mm.
isn't it?
That makes sense. So, kind of, you're saying that we actually probably develop that self-critic from whatever experience it is from a very young age, and it kind of comes along the journey with us.
Yeah, yeah, because there's kind of like there's always experiences there in the background, aren't they, that we all will have, like, that will contribute to us how we are in the world. And when we were talking about beliefs before, about how we are with others and how we see ourselves, and it it's so powerful, isn't it? Because often
Mm,
it's a bit like a magnet, and that magnet will attract the things that fit with the you didn't do well,
right.
or you made
Yeah.
a mistake. Um, and I guess it's like when you think about that self boosting, as you were saying earlier, it's about being able to say, well, actually, no, I did really well there, or I'm happy with what I did. I may have made a mistake, but well, it
Mm,
happened, and that's
yeah, I'm only human. That's the key.
completely, I'm a human being. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting as well because just as you're talking, I'm just having like, like memories, and I don't know if it's like that for most people, but the thing of outside, like, so the narrative from outside will be saying, "Oh, great job, you did this, good on you,"
Mm.
and inside you're thinking, "I messed up." So the people around you, like, it's almost like sometimes they can have more confidence in you than you have
Yeah.
in yourself.
Yeah.
And if you listen to that or tune into that, I think it can be really powerful because people are quite encouraging, aren't they? Like, just in general,
Hmm.
know, they'll
Yeah.
try and lift you up, big you up, give you that pat on the shoulder, which
Yeah.
even if it takes a bit of time for you to warm to that side, that, and that create that kind of narrative for yourself. It's nice when
Yeah,
people are supportive in that way
very
because
much so, isn't it? And I think, I don't know if you noticed, but I feel like sometimes we see more of that. There perhaps is like more of a general awareness of, you know, being kind to people, or, just showing some kindness wherever we can. Um, and that is so important because we could make people's day by just showing a bit of kindness. Like if we think about times where, I don't know, if we might have been upset about something, or, the whole our life feels bleak, or the world feels like a crappy place. Someone might smile at you, or someone might send you a nice message, or whatever it might be, and that helps.
makes all the difference. Yeah,
Mm, mm,
true. Because they say that, don't they? You don't necessarily know what everybody's going through. You don't actually need to. It's just
no.
the idea that you're spreading that bit of
Yeah.
encouragement. You can sense someone's um, lack of self-confidence at times. So just those little words, and I've had that.
Yeah.
People have said that to me, but I've seen other people. I've
Mm,
witnessed other people, showing that support, which maybe
mm.
that helps us to build a new narrative. Those little words of encouragements within ourselves.
Completely. And there's something about like the imagination as well, isn't there? And about, there's very much something powerful about imagery. Okay.
Mm,
So, and an imagery as well with the self-critic. Like if we think about, like, our brains respond to stimulus around us, don't they? Stimuli around us. So if we think about, like, imagine you're hungry and you see this really lovely plate of food, okay, or smells coming from the kitchen. What happens in your
mm.
body? What do you notice?
You start to salivate. It's
Yeah,
almost like your brain is saying the food is coming to you, even if it's not for you. The brain's always.
that's it, isn't it? We salivate and stomach acids are going crazy, and that's because the sight and the smell of the food stimulates an area of our brains called the hypothalamus, and that the job of the hypothalamus is to prepare our body for eating. Okay, in that particular scenario. Now imagine that it's late at night and all the shops are closed, and you want your favorite food, but you can't get it. So you just sit there and you're fantasizing about this food, I can just imagine what it might smell like, what it might taste like,
Mm.
texture. What happens to your stomach acids then?
Is it the same thing? Like, does the okay.
Yeah. So,
So you're
they're
mm,
going in the same way, aren't they? They get going. And that's how imagery is so powerful, because if we relate that to kind of like, say, the self-critic, say if someone's got a memory of where they were criticized by
mm,
somebody, okay, and that memory was, I don't know, in school, okay, so they're in school, that's a memory that they have, a bully criticizing them, or somebody saying something to them.
mm,
They then bring that memory to mind, they think about it, and that may perhaps lead to feelings of sadness or inadequacy. So just by bringing up that memory, just by imagining that,
mm,
feeling those feelings, and I guess that's kind of, self-criticism activates the threat system in our brain. And like the amygdala, which is where the threat system is, it's the oldest part of our brain, and it is designed to pick up on threats in the environment. So that triggers off that fight, flight, freeze response,
mhm,
that we've talked about before. And it's kind of sending signals, that will create physical symptoms in our body as well, like, an increase in blood pressure or release of cortisol, which is needed to kind of avoid threat. And the self critic has a huge part in that, doesn't it? Because if it's self critic is activating our threat system, Um, so how we're responding to that self-critic is so important, because if we can perhaps respond with some kindness, um,
yeah.
So yeah, I hear you. You're loud. I don't have to listen to you all the time. I know you're there.
Mm.
Be irritating, but I'm going to choose to go with the self booster.
Yeah, rather than you on this occasion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Completely. And we can be so creative with it. I mean, often in therapy, I've asked people to imagine what their self critic looks like. It might be this really comical character or this, anything that they wish it to look like. You know, what is it? Is it a human form? Is it an animal? Is it an object? What is it? Let's bring it into the room and let's understand what this self-critic is.
I like that because then if you imagine your self-critic to be something that's quite funny, I don't know, something that's a bit
Mm.
cool, then maybe you don't feel as threatened and hurt by
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Is that,
absolutely.
yeah, that works.
Mm,
Yeah, that makes sense.
definitely. And then maybe it's easier to respond to it as well, perhaps.
Mm. Especially if it makes you like the thought of, the thought that's come into my mind is something that's I don't know if you remember it. I'll show my age now, but do you remember a program as a child called Bagpuss?
I've
Uh,
heard of it.
it was like this big stuffed, fluffy cat, like a toy,
Ah,
this
look.
little girl would come down into the shop and all the
Yeah.
animals and toys would come alive. So Bagpuss was quite lazy.
Oh,
So for some reason that's just going to my mind. So every time I
yeah,
think of Bagpuss, I smile. So
yeah.
maybe um, if I imagine that as my
Mm,
inner critic, the first thing I'd do is smile. So maybe I'd
yeah.
reverse the feelings of negativity and smile first, maybe.
Absolutely. That sounds like I'd love to hear how you get on with that. I'd find it really interesting to see your feedback on that and how you feel about it, because that sounds like a really helpful thing to do. And almost like, as you said, your reaction is going to change it, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a really interesting video that would be helpful for our listeners to watch as well. I'd very much recommend it. It's only a few minutes and you can just
Mhm.
get it on YouTube, and it's called Compassion for Voices.
Oh, compassion.
Um, yeah, and it
Mhm.
beautifully depicts this self-critic. So I think it would be really helpful for people to just watch that and have a look at it.
I'll pop a link in the show notes as well so that the listeners can
Yeah. So
tune into
Compassion
that.
for Voices.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah, I've never thought about it like that. But I've just had this idea of, combat or block it out or ignore it.
Mm,
But yeah, I like changing the face of that voice.
yeah,
That's
because I guess another interesting theme that comes up a lot in kind of working with the self-critic that I've done is, but my self-critic motivates me.
mm, I'm trying to think. I get it
Mm,
absolutely because I can imagine that if your self-critic is saying, you're not
mm,
working hard enough, you didn't put
yeah,
enough time, you could have spent that extra hour and you went and watched
yeah,
TV,
mm,
whatever that is, that could
mm,
be quite encouraging. Um, yeah,
mm.
like you kind of wanting to prove yourself to yourself.
Okay, but imagine going back to the critical teacher and the compassionate teacher.
Yeah.
Imagine if we could be that compassionate teacher instead.
Mhm.
So with the okay, right, I don't know, say someone's got a project to complete or something and they've got a deadline of like a week. Okay, so they haven't been able to do that. Oh, I didn't do it.
Mm,
Really, really crap, this is gonna happen the next time. It's really, really bad.
yeah.
I need to make sure that I get it sorted out next time. That's kind of
Mm,
like still a huge element of criticism, isn't it?
mm,
If we
mm,
were like, well, okay, well, yeah, I messed up a little bit there, no one's perfect. Things happened. Perhaps I might do this the next time.
yeah.
Could we still get the same or a similar result by being kinder? instead of just critical, essentially.
Mm. I definitely think so because, it's we were saying before about, coming into a new year, making plans, setting goals,
Mm.
and I've done this many times. Like, you look back on the year behind and think, "Well, I didn't do anything." Like, I
Mm.
can't think. But actually, if you really break it down,
Yeah,
like month on month, you are doing. In fact, daily. You can even
absolutely.
probably break it down to hourly. You're
Yeah.
doing something that, wow, actually, a lot of
Mm.
people find that difficult, or last
Yeah.
year I found that really difficult, and now I'm able to do that. So, yeah, I think the compassionate side definitely
Mm.
trumps any kind of drive because, say, for instance, using that example, you've got a project to do. Just the fact that you've got a project to do and you're involved in that and it's on your mind and you've set yourself this goal,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's an achievement in itself.
That's it, isn't it? You're trying
Mm,
it. Is it
mm,
better to have tried than not tried? Because often the self-critic, that's again what it does. It holds us back from taking new risks, trying new things, or,
mm.
it can very much just hold us back.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. Mm,
So we could be missing out on so much because of the self-critic as well.
yeah, yeah, just even things like that. So, uh, you can break it down, like I was saying, that for some, you can have difficulty leaving your house and when you start fed up or
Yeah,
in a bad place. So, majority of the time, we're getting up, we're getting ready, and we're facing the world
that's it,
on a
isn't it?
daily basis. And that's something to say, well, look at me, I'm out here. And then
Mm.
having a job, holding down a job. And
Mm.
sometimes it might not be the job that you necessarily want to be doing,
Mm.
but to have that encouraging voice, it makes a change on a day-to-day basis as well. Do you know, like you're going in with an attitude of, well, I like there's a saying where
Mm.
I say wherever you are right now, whatever you're doing,
Mm.
somebody out in the world is looking and thinking, wow, I wish I could be in that position. Doesn't matter what you're doing,
That's
you
so
know.
true. Yeah,
Mm,
true. And I guess kind of there's an element of gratitude there as well, isn't there?
definitely.
Mm. Mm. It,
Finding the good stuff.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, and perhaps can the self-critic block that as well sometimes? Because like you said, the example there of, like people may look back and think, I didn't, haven't achieved anything like you said there, but actually
mm,
have they looked at what they have achieved? Have they written down
mm,
the achievements, however small they might be?
mm.
Because to that person, it might be something huge,
Yeah,
like anything at all, like just getting up an hour earlier or just leaving the house to get milk from the shop. That, because the self-critic's always there. It's always there, isn't it? It's a part of us. We
yeah,
can't,
yeah.
often
Mm,
people will say in therapy sometimes, I want to get rid of my anxiety, I want to get rid of the self-critic. We can't.
mm.
It's part of your threat system. It's going to be there. It's staying with you. But we
All
choose how we can choose how we respond to it. We can think about, reframing it.
mm,
And exactly like you said, it's the first thing is bring it into our awareness. Just notice that yeah, critical sometimes.
no, absolutely. Because there can be so much in, I think we were saying this before as well, that small steps,
Yeah.
instead of looking at the big whole massive task
Mm.
that has you dreading it and avoiding it and procrastinating,
Yeah.
just taking small bite-size chunks and
Mm.
dealing with that. And then before you know it, you're halfway through or you've achieved what you set out to do, whatever
Yeah.
that might be.
Definitely, definitely, because you're breaking it down, aren't you? Like you're working towards those goals, um, bit by bit.
Mhm. You said something there. So, you said that people want to get rid of the
Mm.
critical or negative talk or the anxiety, but it's always with us. So, is anxiety that's something that's within all of us, and we just it's how we're all managing our anxiety.
It's that threat response. Anxiety is part of again, going back to that part of the brain, the amygdala, that is the fear center, and that is if we weren't, I guess a helpful way of kind of thinking about it is like, if you're going to go out and you need to cross the road to get to the other side of the road,
Mm,
certain things are going to be happening. You need to look around, you need to see is there a car coming, any threats there. Our threat is a survival mechanism. It keeps us alive. It is a very, very old, millions and millions of years. It goes back to kind of cavemen times, when they'd go out for food, they'd go out to the woods to look for food,
mm,
come across this bear. This bear's a huge threat. Fight, flight, freeze. Okay. Wouldn't recommend fighting the bear, but trying to flee from the bear. There are
yeah.
these things that are happening in their body that are alerting them to danger. So if we got rid of anxiety
Mm.
completely, we wouldn't have the greatest threat system there. And I don't know how long we'd be alive for.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's good to have a level of anxiousness so that you are aware of what's going on around you, what could be a threat, like you're saying, crossing the road or, yeah, I don't know, yeah,
It's
everything.
how we interpret it. It's how we. It's almost like, say, we'll all feel anxious at times, won't we? Like
Mhm,
it's natural, a little bit of anxiety or overwhelming anxiety. We'll feel that as human beings. Everyone will, but it's how we kind of respond to it. So, say like that example of when we said about going onto the stage to do a performance, for example,
mm,
if the um response is right, I'm just going to avoid. I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to do very well. So sod it. I'm just not
yeah,
doing it.
not turning up.
Yeah, that's not helpful because that's avoidance. Avoidance maintains anxiety. If we're going to say,
Mm,
okay, yeah, I'm a bit anxious. I notice that, my breathing's changing. I'm feeling a little bit hot and, my legs are like turning to jelly a bit. Again, natural things that happen in our body, which is part of the fight, flight, freeze response, because all of those things that happen in our bodies have a function. Just saying to ourselves, yeah, okay, I'm noticing that I'm feeling anxious. That's okay. I'm going to go and do it anyway.
yeah,
Completely different, isn't it? So it's how we respond to that anxiety. It's when it impacts on our day-to-day functioning, when it stops us doing things, when it impacts on our self-esteem, you know, impacts on relationships, all of that, that it then becomes an issue. So
yeah.
it's debilitating.
That makes sense. And it kind of just thinking about that, it's kind of understandable how it can grow. It
Yeah,
can start with something so small.
yeah.
Oh, a lady was saying to me the other day that I was saying, I've got a dog, and she was saying I love dogs, but I'm scared of them because when she was 11, uh,
Mm.
a dog actually took a chunk out of her face. It was that bad that her mom, or what she always remembers her mom saying, "I can see
Yeah.
his teeth." So it must have been quite severe, and so now she's very obviously scared of dogs, and it totally
Mm.
makes sense. But like you say, it could be the thing of
Mm.
that's something that in her mind, the dog coming,
Yes,
it's a very huge threat because of what's
absolutely.
already happened.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's based
Yeah.
on their experience. And understandably, the human mind, as human beings,
Mhm.
we want to avoid things that where we've had a bad experience, don't we? We're not going to readily put ourselves in that situation again. But what could happen is, what might she not yet discover about dogs?
That she loves them. That they're lovely and yeah.
Absolutely. Or
Yeah.
not all dogs will bite me, you know. We
Mm,
it, and it's kind of like we have those behaviors to because we feel like it keeps us safe if we avoid. So she would perhaps feel safer if she's avoiding dogs because of the experience that she's had. But
mhm,
as we said there, then she may not get to discover that not all dogs will bite her or
mhm.
harm her.
And there's no need to feel like if you see a dog coming along on the road,
Mm,
imagine that anxiety building up, and it must be quite terrifying. And then
yeah,
it's gone, and but then there's another dog, so it must be something that's kind of on all the time.
yeah,
Mm.
it's alert. Isn't it? That alert is that alarm system in our that's kind of what it is, isn't it? It's like you know, if you're in a building and you know that the fire alarm's going to go off on a Thursday at 12 o'clock,
Mm.
um, and you hear that fire alarm, your body's still probably going to react in the what's that noise? Why is that going off? Is there a fire? You know, so your threat system's already activated, isn't it? Even
Yeah.
though it is not an actual threat, it's a perceived
Mm.
threat. Our brains will react in the same way. So in that situation, we might say to ourselves, right, well, okay, I know it's Thursday, it's 12 o'clock. This normally happens. The likelihood of a fire is really unlikely. Still evacuate the building anyway. Don't stay there if you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, that's a really, I mean, it's a really helpful way of looking at it. And again, it's like saying, just changing or trying to change, and it's gradual because it's not going to happen just in one day.
No, of course not.
Having those steps that you said to be able to, I just love that the whole idea of the visualization as well.
Yeah.
That was something I've heard that like athletes
Mm,
part of their training, so obviously they're doing the physical training, they have
yeah.
special diets,
Yeah.
but a big part of their training is visualization as well. Like
Yeah.
they, yeah, are you aware of that? Like they visualize the race, or let's say
Nice.
if you're a swimmer,
Yeah.
and so they visualize everything turning up um,
Mm.
on the day of the race. Uh,
Mhm.
Getting
Mm.
changed in the changing room, the smells, the sounds, putting their
Mm.
things away, walking out to the pool,
Yeah.
and actually going through the whole step-by-step detailed process,
Mm.
winning the race.
Mm.
That's actually part of the training, and I was just like, "Wow, that's quite
Yeah.
interesting," because you said something there about there's a
Mm.
part of your brain that doesn't really know the difference.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's the
Mhm.
because when we're in that threat system, that's the bit that's taken over, isn't
Mm,
it? That's
mhm,
the bit that is taken over. The prefrontal cortex is where is kind of our planning, our emotional regulation part of that. You know,
mm.
that's not functioning as well when the amygdala takes over. So it's kind of like that. I guess what they're doing is they're strengthening that part of the
Ah,
gameplay. They're strengthening that. And like we said about the imagery, when we imagine something, and I use a lot of imagery, I use a lot of mindfulness as well, you know, compassionate imagery, um, lots of that because it's so powerful. And it, it can, if we go, you know, that example of somebody remembering something, an example of where they were criticized,
yeah,
we can also bring up a memory of, okay, can you remember the last time you felt good about something?
yeah.
What was happening? What did you notice? You know, and that might evoke feelings of happiness or, you know, feeling like there's a sense of achievement.
Mm,
So it can completely make sense what you're saying there of why they would use that.
mm,
It
mhm.
sounds like it'd be so powerful to helping them get towards their goal.
Yeah, yeah. So you could do that for anything like, say, if you did have I don't know, speech to give in front of a lot of people, would
Mm.
that be a good exercise to,
Yeah.
visualize the whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. But also, what I'd be kind of thinking about there is what role is a self-critic playing before you are going to put yourself in that situation?
Mm,
Um, because there's something about the processing that we're doing before and after something like that as well. Often what will happen is the processing before will be of quite a negative nature. Uh,
Mm,
what if I, trip, or what if I um stumble on my words, or what if I, stutter, what if I forget what I'm going to say? It would generally be focused there on the negative as opposed to, yeah, I'm going to do really well. I'm going to give it a go. So what if I stutter? Doesn't matter. So there's something about like not getting into that before putting yourself in this situation because,
mm,
like we can talk ourselves out of things as well, can't we?
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Why am I even going to turn up? Why even try? Because I'm going to fail, and I don't want to go through the embarrassment, and I don't want people to see me
That's,
failing. Mm,
but again, what do they not discover, perhaps?
yeah, I would say that actually it could work out very well.
Yeah.
You could achieve that goal and no longer be afraid, or not so much not be afraid. Maybe the fear thing will always be there,
Mm,
but nothing terrible is going to happen. You know,
yeah,
no one's laughing at you. No one's, you know, shouting you down or anything like that.
absolutely.
And I've often heard that as well, that if you're not,
Mm,
it could be anything, but I'll use that
mm,
speech thing again or performance,
mm,
that a bit of nerves is good
mm,
because it shows that you care, you're
mm,
passionate
mm.
about what you're doing, and there should be that kind of apprehension to start with, or a bit of that. Would you agree with that? Like, so if you're about to do something like that, that
Mm,
if you have no nerves, that's not
mm.
good, would you say?
Yeah, again, I guess it's going back to we're going to have those things that are activated in our body, aren't we? Those
Mhm.
symptoms that are activated in our body, but it's right, these things are happening in my body because they're serving a function. So when my heart rate is increasing, my heart is trying to work harder and faster to pump oxygen around to the major organs in my body. That's a good thing.
Mm,
Or I'm sweating, my body's trying to cool itself down. So it's kind of thinking about the function that that has. And also
mm,
perhaps that, okay, I'm noticing that I'm having this apprehension. Uh,
mm.
how am I going to respond to this? And I think it's just taking that because obviously, often if we think about like the threat response, the anxiety response is quick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't leave a lot of time or headspace for um thinking about a response. It's a quick thing.
Mm, mm.
So it's almost like we're slowing down that process a little bit. Because if you think about kind of like say going to do a performance or something, yeah, it's going to be that element of right, okay, this nervous energy, this excitement. Um, but we don't want it to be that it blocks or we then avoid.
Yeah.
Right, go and do this.
Mm. Yeah, no, it makes sense, like, because you said fight, flight, or freeze, and
Mm.
some people suffer from stage fright. It's actually called fright. They're that frightened
Yeah,
that they can't move, they can't talk, they can't, you know.
that's very, very true, isn't it? And often after something like that as well, what will we often do once we've put ourselves in a situation like that? I don't know, what will we do once it's finished? What we generally more inclined to do?
Criticise more because
Yeah,
it's like saying, "Oh,
yeah,
this is bad and you messed that up. Oh my gosh, you're an
that's
idiot."
it,
Yeah.
isn't it? Oh, that person didn't smile. That means they didn't like it, or that
Mm,
person was on their phone, so they weren't watching. Or so what
mm,
will happen is that's that post-event processing that occurs generally of a negative nature. So
mm,
often what I will say to people is, if we're looking at kind of like the function of the self-critic in something like that, even if it's going into a social situation or something,
mhm,
trying something new. What I'd like you to do is when you come away from it, can you please write down quite quickly 2 to 3 positive or balanced things about what you noticed after that? So we're trying to shift that attention, that focus away from the negative to the more balanced.
reality. Like it's yeah, what's really
Absolutely, yeah,
yeah,
'cause that's such a
yeah.
valid point. What really happened? Because in your mind, was it perhaps magnified because of how you were feeling about yourself or what your self-critic was
Mm.
saying to you? So that's very true, yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. You give me a few tips as well. One of the other things that I find really difficult, I was saying this the other day, is, they say, let's go, or you go into a networking event.
Yeah.
I find those so
Mm.
horrible. Just it's like you go in and you feel like, and I know, 'cause again, that's not the reality, but you go and you think everybody knows each other and you're the only person who doesn't.
Yeah.
So I always make my way up to the tea, the coffee, or the wine,
Mm.
and stand there thinking, "Oh," trying to build up the courage to go and join a conversation.
Yeah.
And I've got to that point where I can have the conversation, and I'm standing there talking, thinking, they're looking at me saying, "Oh, they're thinking, what am I coming over for?" You start to have all this stuff
Well,
that's blocking you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, how do we know they're not thinking, "Oh, look at this lovely lady, come talk to me, really interested in knowing what she's got to say to me and having a conversation with her." So actually, it is interesting, isn't it, how will people say often, I don't and I find this really interesting. I
Mm.
read a room when I walk in.
Ah.
Interesting. So you can tell me what everyone's thinking, can you? Because it's a common thing that people say, isn't it? I read a room. But actually, what
Uh,
we're doing there, we're making lots of assumptions that have no basis.
on anything.
No.
Yeah, because sometimes, like, for instance, you could look and somebody's face if you don't know somebody, you
Yeah,
don't know what their facial expressions mean. So
absolutely.
somebody could be
Yeah,
standing there feeling so nervous and scared, just like you,
yeah,
and but from the outside, it looks as if they're annoyed or a bit
yeah.
aloof, and so you
Mm,
think, "Oh, I'm not gonna talk to them."
yeah,
When actually that might have been the best thing you could have done, and they would have been so like, "Oh, thank God," and you're thinking the same thing, but you cut
absolutely.
yourself off from interactions and
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
so true, isn't it? Because they might just be, you know, really, really anxious. Maybe they don't know what
Mm,
to say. Maybe it's their first time there. Maybe. So I think you're again that it's the what we show the world, isn't it? Is not what
mm,
we're doing.
that's it. We make stuff up, don't we, to fill in
Yeah,
gaps?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And it is something as again as human beings, we all do that. It's
Mm,
we all make assumptions at times, but it's kind of like how do we bring this, into our awareness?
yeah.
And again, journaling can be really helpful with thinking about like the self-critic as well as like, just using journaling or writing to help you to notice that self-critic and when it's louder or what's happening when that self-critic is there just to bring that more into awareness.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think sometimes the self-critic can be so overpowering, you just don't know
Mm,
that you're doing it, so you're not aware. But also because you're speaking to yourself so negatively, so you've got this impression of yourself of, "Oh, I'm not very smart, I'm not very good, I'm not very fast, I'm not very clever,"
mm,
and then you try to overcompensate, and that then probably becomes the people pleasing because that's the kind of,
yeah.
it's almost like, oh, trying to think of an example where you feel so, I suppose it's a low self-esteem, isn't it? That you look at yourself in such a negative way, you think other people are looking at you in that way, and then you're trying to give more of yourself to cover that
Oh,
bit. Is that making sense? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
completely. Because that's, people pleasing definitely goes hand in hand with the self-critic, doesn't it? And that overcompensate,
Mhm.
you know, it manifests in so many kind of different ways. I think people pleasing, it's kind of like always thinking about others' needs, not thinking about your own needs, or self-care or your own well-being.
Mm,
Again, the self-critic's almost driving that as well, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Like it's almost like this the voice
Mm,
um, that's saying, "Oh, you've got to make because you're not good enough, so you've got to just do a bit more."
that's it.
You
Yeah.
know,
At what point do you when does that stop? Is the thing, isn't it?
yeah, because even in work and it depends, I suppose, how you look at, the world or the workplace that you're in even.
Mm,
And if you think I suppose there's all different type of, archetypes or types of
mm,
characters in the workplace.
mm.
And so I've worked at places where, we close at 5, that's the end of the day.
Yeah.
And there's workplaces where people just don't even notice the time. So you're
Mm.
sitting there thinking, "Oh, I better carry on working because nobody else is moving."
Yeah.
There'll be the brave ones who say, "Well, I'm going, it's 5 o'clock. Get my stuff, I'm off."
Yeah.
And then there's there's the ones, and it always makes me laugh, 'cause where it's 4:45 and they
Yeah.
start packing, switching off the computer, putting the cup away, tidying up, and standing by there, like, it reminds me of school, standing
Mm.
ready, coat on, bag on the shoulder. They do, so as 5 o'clock hits, they're not packing
Out
away
door.
now.
That's yeah.
And
That's it, isn't it?
I've gotta be prepared to just walk out of here, and
Yeah.
I suppose it's a bit of a sign about how they feel about the job, but, um
Actually, that's interesting. Or could it be that they've
Mm,
got really good boundaries?
yeah, because that's what I was gonna say. That's what they will always say, "Well, they're paying me
Yeah.
until 5 o'clock. If I start doing that little bit of extra, they're gonna expect it. So let's just let's just let them know, right? Right,
Absolutely.
let go."
Yeah.
Mm,
Because I guess there is something important there, isn't there, about that kind of like having those boundaries? Because if we think about like the people pleasing, if we are always, and
mm,
of course, we want to, as human beings, do things for others as well. We're not
yeah.
taking it away from anybody. That's a nice thing to do. It's a lovely, kind, compassionate thing to do. But
Mm,
if it's at the expense of yourself
mm,
and leaves you no time for your self-care or your well-being, or you know means that you don't do anything for yourself, that's actually
yeah,
not a healthy thing.
yeah. And it can actually build, like, a bit of resentment, like, if you're always giving it, whether it's work, let's say, for example, and
Mm,
you sometimes I think, I suppose what is the motivator? Because I suppose in a work situation, maybe it's because you feel like if you please the boss, then you're gonna get further ahead, you might get that promotion. If
mm,
it's a friendship, it's because or a relationship even, you're holding on so desperately because you don't want them to leave.
yeah,
So you're kind of putting everything first,
yeah,
for them first. And like you say, you could build resentment where actually
very much.
you just want to, get on with your life. You don't want to stay the extra half an hour because now you're stuck in traffic,
Yeah.
and you're sitting on the bus or in your car
Mm,
fuming. But you put yourself in that position because you're thinking,
so true.
long term, yeah.
Yeah, because it's almost like kind of there is a sense of responsibility within that as well, isn't there? Like often kind of when I work with like self-esteem and people pleasing behaviors, which often come, I guess it's a rule, like when we're thinking about
Mm,
like beliefs and rules. In CBT, it's a rule. I should please others. Okay, so I must please others. But there's yeah, the what you're describing there are the unintended consequences of that, of leads to resentment, it leads to tiredness, frustration, burnout, a sense of
mm,
anxiety, not thinking about your own needs, undermining your own needs and just agreeing with others, not feeling like you can make a decision,
mm.
apologizing a lot. That's a big one as well. Often, people will apologize and we do it culturally, I think, a lot in Britain, don't we?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I heard this, and it was from, group was in. a group. It was to do with like creative writing, and there were some
Yeah.
that were dancers and things. And we were sitting in the group talking and discussing stuff, and every single one of us would say, "Oh, sorry, sorry." And we kept saying sorry. So one of them said, "Look, this is terrible. We're all just apologising just for existing."
Okay, yeah.
We had this thing where you say, if you said sorry, you straight away you have to say not sorry. So we're like, sorry,
Oh,
not
fab, that's real.
yeah. And it slowly
Yeah,
stopped by
yeah,
doing that. Sorry, oh not sorry. I'm not going to apologise for just, being me, being here. It's the opposite.
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
you're so right. And I guess that person just bringing it into the room, that feels like that was really important, just to acknowledge that that was happening. Because I guess sometimes it's just, we just do it. I know
habit.
I've done it often. I'm like, what am I apologizing for? I haven't done anything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or something, "No, you're all right. No, you're all right. No, you're all" you're having this, "I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry." You know?
That reminds me of something today, actually. It's so funny. It's not the sorry thing, but it's similar. It came to mind. I was
Mhm.
walking into to go into the gym, and there was a gentleman on the other side of the door, and I opened the door, and I said, "Come on, you go first." And he said, "No, you go first." I said, "No, you go first." And he said, "No, you go first." And then that carried on. And he was like, "Right, I'm gonna go then." And it was nice because it's just kind of like, the manners, the politeness and everything, but it just brought to mind that when you were talking about the sorry.
It's funny, isn't it? Like, it probably is a really cultural thing that we're, like,
Yeah.
apologising and the
Mm,
politeness, which is, like,
mm.
lovely. I think
Yeah,
that's really nice where everyone's trying to, especially when you don't know somebody, because I think that's even more important, that your thoughts
absolutely.
about thinking about others, and other people's experience,
Yeah.
um, when there could be times, when people are not thinking about you at all, and, it can come across as quite abrupt and rude, but again, you don't know what's going on beneath the surface.
That
So,
is it,
uh,
isn't it? And often, it takes time to build like those connections with people as well, doesn't it?
mm,
Even as a therapist, I don't expect people to open up to me straight away about everything. Absolutely not. That would be such a huge expectation to have.
yeah,
They have to take the time to build up that relationship with me.
mhm,
Um, and then they'll share when they feel comfortable. And that's absolutely how it should be.
mm,
It's something that you build, isn't it? And
yeah,
critics a very difficult subject to talk about. It's not an easy thing to talk about because
no,
often when people bring that into the room, we know we're going to be going to where has this come from? What are the origins of it? How did it develop? And that can be really, really powerful.
mm,
Um,
and I can imagine it can be quite triggering to talk about it, especially if it brings up very negative, um, thoughts and feelings,
yeah.
and especially if you're not aware, but all of a sudden
Mm,
like, because you're talking about things, you're
mm,
unpacking and you're taking the steps back, kind of retracing your steps, and then all of a sudden the realization of why you do this might
yeah.
be quite a whoa experience. Do a lot of people have that? Are they shocked when they get to the bottom of it all? Or
Yeah, it can be like, especially with the voice, like when I mentioned about, okay, when you think about that self-critic, who
mm,
is there a voice there? Is there, thinking about the messages, thinking about it, it can be quite deep,
mm,
quite difficult stuff because it involves like, dynamics in relationships and like experiences that people have had that they've struggled with. So very much. And I think like with anything, we've got to understand a little bit about it, the background of it,
mm,
before we look at what are we going to do now?
mm, mm, 'cause maybe understanding,
Mm,
um, where it's come from and why, and probably just having to
Yeah.
relive a bit of that experience.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, once you find that and it clicks,
Mm.
maybe that makes it easier to find a plan or
Yeah.
something that you can kind of do or prepare.
Very much.
Mm,
So that element of what I find so useful with it is we can bring compassion to that. We can bring compassion to those experiences. We can bring compassion to that 5-year-old who was bullied at school, who still hears that bully in their
yeah,
mind, who still hears their voice. And like again, that sense of compassion is just powerful.
mm, no, absolutely. That is powerful in itself. Um, recognizing, finding what's at the bottom, and covering those layers,
Yeah.
and kind of getting to the seed of
Mm.
where that. Because I
Mm.
think, like you said, the two things go hand in hand. But with the
Yeah.
people pleasing, it's something that you want to. Because people look at that sometimes as a weakness, don't they? Like they can take
Mm.
advantage, they can be,
Mm.
they can manipulate you because they can see that you want to please all the time. And some people really do recognize that, see that, and use it
Yeah.
against you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. And we know that happens, don't we? We know that can absolutely happen. But I guess what we'd be reflecting on and thinking about is what we can never do is change somebody else or
Mm,
how they are. But what we do have a choice to do is how we deal with that or how we respond
mm,
to that. And if we kind of like think about like working on assertiveness,
mm,
it does come with a bit of warning because often if you're somebody who has always said yes, then you say no to somebody, they'll be like, "What? Really? Why? You
all of a
wouldn't
sudden,
normally do." Because you're changing a behavior, you're changing something, aren't you? Which sometimes can come with a little bit of backlash there as well.
and it's been ready and prepared.
Yeah,
Backlash, how you deal with that, because that
yeah.
could set you back. You could be like, "No," and they're like, "What?" And then you're like, "Yeah, yeah, sorry, I meant yeah." So it's gotta be something that I suppose you work on. It's not just gonna work out.
Of course not. And you look at trying little things out. Let's do a little experiment on something that, you normally say yes to, but it's a little bit easier to perhaps say no to. Let's see what happens and let's go with that. And then again, that's where the confidence builds, isn't it? That's how we build the confidence. We don't go jumping in the deep end,
No,
because
no.
it isn't going to probably, well, sometimes it works, but you
Oh,
know. Oh,
yeah, sometimes it can be just like if you've come to that point, like, let's just go full hog,
yeah.
and yeah, people will adjust,
Mm.
if they don't, like you say, it's you've got to deal with you, not what the
Yeah,
outside, because you can only control this, what's going on
that's true. And there's a message in there.
here. Mm,
If the other person's reaction, there's a message there as well, isn't there, for us to take
mm,
forward?
yeah, yeah, that's speaks volumes. Yeah.
Mm.
So, what would you say would be some first, little small steps that
Yeah.
could have a great impact that you can take to overcome, the people pleasing,
Mm.
um, and the negative self-talk? Like, what would you are the little things that if the list, for a listener now, recognizing some of these things,
Mm.
what would be some of those small steps that they could probably start doing, like, from today?
Yeah, so I'd probably say, right, okay, again, I know I keep saying it, but let's go with the journal, right? Let's go with the journal.
Yeah, no.
Like, at the end of each day, just took a few minutes to write down what was going on, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what was happening. When you're noticing yourself saying something unkind to yourself or something harsh, just stop for a second, think about, is this kind?
Mm,
Is it necessary? Can I respond differently? Take that time to just take a breath
mm,
and let it settle, because that's then in your awareness. And next time, hopefully, you'll be a little bit more aware of it, a bit more aware of it, just becoming aware of that voice. perhaps kind of think about, is this holding me back? Are there
Mhm.
things that I want to do but I'm not doing because of this self-critic? Can I start to do some of these things? Can I start to face some of those fears in a gradual way and maybe put myself in situations that I wouldn't normally put myself in? And just give things a go, like have an open mind about trying something. Bit like
Yeah,
an experiment. Let's just do an experiment. Let's see what happens. Um, no expectations. And then also when we're noticing that voice, let's try to strive to replace it with a bit of kindness. What would you say to a friend that was thinking
yeah,
this? What would your response be? Thinking about your own needs within that. So if you're thinking about kind of like the people pleasing element, where are you
mhm,
fit into that? Are you noticing that you're feeling more irritated, more resentful, as you said, because you keep saying yes to everything? Are there certain things that could give a little, could you bracket time off for yourself? Could you
mm,
think about one or two things that are important for your well-being and invest time in that? Um, Build up on your own successes, look at your self-worth, write down, a few positive things, helpful things that you notice about you, or what makes you happy, and focus on that. Um, and make decisions, because sometimes we will often, again, with the people pleasing and the self-critic, it will stop us from
yeah,
making decisions. We'll ask for reassurance before we make a decision, or we'll do lots and lots of research. Make the decision and let's go with it.
move forward. Yeah, yeah.
If it's not right, again, we human beings will learn from it. You know,
Mm,
like be open to the learning as well, and reframe the unhelpful thoughts that are there in a compassionate, in a gentle way. You know,
mm,
um, how can I be kinder? Is this kind? You know,
yeah.
mm, yeah. So I could go on and on and on because I don't shut up.
No, no, 'cause it makes sense, like, because that's the thing. 'Cause honestly, I get so much from this because it's little steps. I'm aware of it, I suppose, and that's what we're saying, sometimes like, "Why am I saying that? Let me just do another one that people do and that I've done and I've stopped doing."
Yeah.
I think I saw this on LinkedIn a few years back where you're writing an email
Mm.
and but maybe you're chasing something up and you don't want to feel like you're a pest, so you put I'm only or
Mm.
I'm just reaching
Yes.
out. The word
Yeah.
just and only, because it's
Yeah.
almost like you're apologising for yourself,
True. That's
you
so
know.
true. Yes.
So sometimes I'll be writing the email and I'll go to put only and I'll delete that. No,
Yeah.
I'm just contacting you. I'm not. Do you know what I mean? I'm allowed.
Absolutely. Like you said, you're giving yourself permission, aren't you? And you're taking away the language that might be a little bit on the fence, or a little bit
Mm,
apologetic, or a little bit making excuses, or whatever it might be. That's a really valid point, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So you kind of
because
be, mm,
sometimes we might not be feeling all that confident, but again, if we're acting as if we're portraying that, that's what people are going to pick up on, you know.
mm, and then
Uh,
it builds, doesn't it? It's like layers that you
Okay.
come across more confident, so you feel more confident. You come across more confident, so you feel more confident, and it
Absolutely.
that way. Mm,
Yeah, we build on it. And again, I guess positive affirmations have their place as well, hugely, don't they?
yeah,
Sense of like, right, okay, what, am I going to say to myself today that's going to give me that boost or help me, Um, and that can be useful as well. It's picking up on that.
absolutely. It can change the whole complexion of your day. I always use that thing about I hate being late.
Yeah.
So something as simple as
Mm.
getting out of bed half an hour later can make such a big difference. So straight away, there's the panic element. I've got to
Yeah,
rush, and then you're rushing, and things like I don't even take sugar in my tea anymore. But putting the sugar in because I'm rushing, and then the sugar goes
yeah,
everywhere, and now you're wound up and you're frustrated and you're
yeah,
cursing yourself, everything's rubbish, and then you go out and you're stuck in traffic, and you're setting yourself up for this day of resentment, annoyance, irritation. Whereas
Okay.
even if you have that half an hour of, "Oh, I'm late," you just think, "Well, you
Mm,
know what? I am. That's what it
mm,
is." You probably needed that bit of extra half an hour sleep. There's got to be a reason for that, um,
absolutely.
and embrace it,
Yeah.
and just take that breath
Yeah.
before. Yeah,
Definitely, like you said, that taking that breath it gives an opportunity to ground ourselves, doesn't it? It gives us an opportunity to respond and not react.
yeah, right, yeah. Respond and not react. Yeah, perfect. I love that. That's a plan.
Absolutely.
I'll remember that for tomorrow morning.
I need to take my own advice as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes like you hear the like solution, and you think, gosh, it makes so much sense because it's kind of natural, I suppose. But what we're actually doing is the unnatural thing, like
Yeah.
beating ourselves up. But yeah, it's good to have that clarity, a reminder that these things, um, it's to look at ourselves and know that we can make these changes and feel
Absolutely.
better. Yeah, it's been fantastic as always, Sheena.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for being here and your amazing advice and tips. Again, I'll pop that. I'll put your website again as a reminder in the show notes, but also the link that you mentioned for the video Compassion for Voices.
That's it, Compassion for Voices. And then my website is SC Therapy and Wellbeing. So www.sctherapyandwellbeing.co.uk.
Perfect. So I'll pop those both in the show notes and look forward to speaking to you next time.
Most definitely. You take care.
All the best. See you soon.